As we continue in our series, it's very important for me to state at the very beginning that you don't need a PhD to teach kids how to read. You simply need to follow the established steps of really how the brain works. How do kids learn to read? How does the brain learn to read? And the steps are simple. What we have to do is pay attention to the process and recognize that it is a whole process. It is simply not just phonics or phonemic awareness. It is an entire process. And I look at these steps once again. You have the foundational steps. Then you have fluency, grammar and vocabulary, sentence comprehension, and then finally reading comprehension. This is extremely important to understand that it's an entire process. It's just not about foundations. So with that overview, let's go back to some of our key understandings or elements in the process. We've talked about phonics, phonemic awareness, but here in this video, I want to focus on building word and world knowledge. Sometimes we think, hey, I have to wait till my kids really are older for them to understand complex literature. No, don't do that. Both at home and in school, kids should be exposed to a constant stream of beautiful classical literature. You should teach them by reading to them. What you want is that their oral vocabulary and knowledge about the world are increasing as they're actively participating with you, listening to you, interacting with you, as you read these great stories, these poems, and have great conversations with them. You might say, but they're too young. No. They're brilliant. They can learn more by what you say to them than by what they can read at this point for themselves. But never underestimate how powerful it is to help your children to build an oral vocabulary, a great knowledge, not just about words, but knowledge about the world. You want to read to them the great classics, any great book that has transcended time, all the great stories. Read that to them. Speak to them like they're human beings, okay? And have them develop this rich sense of oral vocabulary, because they'll store that and use that later on to decode the pronunciations of words and also the meanings of words. What they hear from you early in their lives is going to be crucial to what they're able to say and read and spell for themselves. This is unbelievably important. And you know what? You can do this. Parents can do this in the home, and teachers can do this at school. Some would say, well, I'm not sure if I can read as well. Well, you know what? Get some tapes and listen with your kids and read the books with them, whatever it takes to expose them to great and complex language at the earliest ages. All right, so please keep in mind. So I want you to keep building word and world knowledge as you go. And you can do this during the day. You can do this at night. You can do this before they go to bed. Science has pointed out to us the extraordinary nature of interacting with your children by reading to them. It is the best schooling that they ever can receive, that they can ever get, and it's the greatest gift you can give to them. All right, have I beaten that horse dead? No, I'm going to go back to it later on. So yes, we've talked about phonemic awareness, and that's great. But you know what? Reading helps them to develop that. You don't necessarily need 16 million lesson plans to do this. Reading will help them to develop phonemic awareness, okay? And yes, now phonics is a little different. This is more technical. It's teaching them how to associate sounds with letters. But again, you can do that. Know your basic sounds, know the 44 sounds, and how the 26 letters will combine to spell those sounds and to represent those sounds. All right. So now, let's climb the stairs, okay? So we have fluency, and what I call here step 2. It's a little bit artificial, but the point is that eventually you want your kids to go from knowing how to decode sounds and symbols to reading fluently, articulately, pausing for meaning, understanding, showing that they have a grasp of the sentence structure. And fluency is therefore the ability to read words and sentences accurately, articulately, and precisely. This is a very good definition, and you can take a look at that later on. Let's jump to step 3, which is really all tied in. So these steps are a bit artificial because they're really connected, but I placed them separately so you can see that they ought to be emphasized in different ways and at different levels. Grammar and vocabulary. I'm going to come up here and look at that. What is grammar? Grammar is a system of standardized rules about language, which helps us to communicate coherently. It helps students to identify the parts of speech and how writers use those elements to organize and communicate their ideas clearly, creatively, and concisely. Vocabulary acquisition is the process of learning what words mean by studying their structures and by identifying them with the concepts they communicate and the network of ideas to which they belong. It's a lot to digest, but you want to know that grammar is not just, commas and no, it's more than that. It's a system that helps us to identify what the parts of speech are, how writers use them to organize and communicate their ideas so that your students can, and your children and your students can imitate that, understand the structure of the language, and use it both in writing and in reading. Vocabulary acquisition, not just memorizing words, but understanding the context of words, where they come from, how do we use them, how do we spell them, what are the different definitions. Very important. Cannot be overstated. Now, this step is often missing, and we rarely hear about it, but I love it. That is sentence comprehension. What do I mean by sentence comprehension? Sentence comprehension, scroll back here, is the ability to understand each sentence's main idea and to make inferences by analyzing how the writer uses specific words and grammatical styles to convey meaning. So it's understanding the main idea of the sentence and how the writer is conveying that idea. Students must also understand how each sentence is related to the sentences that come before or after it. Composition is crucial to comprehension. Reading and writing are complementary. So when students can understand a sentence, it is also because they've been working at constructing sentences. Why do we not talk about sentence comprehension? We often jump right to reading comprehension. I don't know. Because students need to understand not just words, but the larger body, which is the sentence. It's the unit of real comprehension. If I can drill deep and help my students to understand what a sentence means, then we can string them together and construct them when we write, and this will lead us to the larger picture of reading comprehension, the big picture. So all of these steps are extremely important. Go over them, look at them, and obviously, the last section is when we get to reading comprehension, which is the ability to read larger bodies of text with confidence, understanding, and excellence. And all of this is normally termed the science of reading. That's the buzzword. But guess what? People have been doing this for years before that terminology was given to it or linked to it. This is the regular process of reading. It's normative, and it can be done in the home, and it ought to be done at school. So if we look at the overview once again, we have phonemic or phonological awareness, we have phonemic awareness, but again, the whole thing comes down to what? Teaching the sequence of sounds, the parts, right? The sequence of words and the sequence of sentences. Phonics is a method of teaching reading. But again, we need to keep building word knowledge and world knowledge, knowledge about words and knowledge about the world, all right? And again, at each step here, we have definitions of what phonics is, fluency, grammar and vocabulary, sentence comprehension, and finally reading comprehension. Take a look at this chart. I hope it helps you to understand the steps to reading success.